What's the biggest karma story you've heard that restored your faith in justice? Story 1. I worked mid-level IT at a company where the CEO loved war room speeches about integrity while quietly canceling bonuses and right-sizing whole departments. People were exhausted and scared. One Friday, the night janitor, Lewis, asked me how to print his son's medical paperwork. I helped him connect to an old networked printer in the executive suite. The job stalled, so we walked over. When we opened the tray, there was a stack already sitting there. Payout schedules, shell company invoices, and a spreadsheet literally titled Crisis Fund Allocation. Except the fund was just our canceled bonuses rerouted into a consulting firm with the CEO's wife listed as project principal. Lewis stared. "Is this stealing?" he asked. I told him to take his son's forms and leave the rest. I spent the weekend checking server logs. Turns out the printer scanned to email was still authenticated to the CEO's assistant. I pulled the complete audit trail, hashed it, and emailed it to our legal hotline from an anonymous Proton account. Monday, HR locked down the floor and told everyone to keep working. By lunch, the board had shown up. By evening, the CEO was escorted out. No jacket, no speech, while the head of legal read a careful memo about misappropriation and related party transactions. We got our bonuses retroactively, backdated with interest. Lewis got a $10K Employee Resilience Award. I thought that was the end. The twist landed 2 weeks later, a LinkedIn post from the CEO's wife insisting she knew nothing, which prompted a comment spree from a tiny account with a cat avatar. The account posted screenshots of Venmo reimbursements labeled with our project codes and beach emojis. People mocked it until the cat account uploaded a video of the wife telling a contractor to bury invoices under wellness consulting. The cat account? The security guard's college sophomore daughter who'd been stiffed by the wife for babysitting and had kept every message. The DA cited her thread in the charges. We sent her a care package with a new laptop. She DM'd back a single line, "I just wanted you all to get paid." That was the first time in years our break room sounded like a party.
Story 2. I was 11 when Mom said Dad chose his new life over us. I believed her because she had the house and the calendar and the louder voice. Visits with Dad felt like court-ordered playdates. He'd show up with science kits and awkward jokes, and I'd keep a mental tally of everything he missed. By the time I was 13, I parroted phrases like emotional inconsistency. Mom's lawyer taught me how to testify with my hands folded. On the day of the custody hearing, the courtroom smelled like pencils and cold air. Mom's side filled the benches. Dad came alone with a blue folder. When it was my turn, I said I didn't feel safe with him. He didn't flinch, just asked the judge if he could submit exhibits from a child's own voice. The blue folder wasn't evidence. It was letters, dozens. Birthday cards returned to sender, emails printed with undeliverable, and a USB drive of voicemail files. My voice, age 8 to 11, giggling and saying I couldn't talk because Mom says you make us late. There was also an audio recording from our school conference. Mom had accidentally left her phone recording while telling the counselor Dad was unstable. You can hear the counselor gently say, "He's actually the one who attends every meeting." Mom went white. The judge angled his glasses down and asked me if I wanted to listen privately to a letter Dad wrote when I turned 10, the one that had been returned, twice. I nodded. It said he loved me even if I hated him, that he'd be at the park with the big willow tree every Saturday at noon in case I changed my mind. I remembered those Saturdays. We drove past that park on errands, and Mom would say, "Look at him pretending." I asked to speak to the judge alone. I don't remember my exact words, only the taste of metal in my mouth, as I said, "I think I haven't been allowed to know my dad." Custody flipped. Not wholesale, but enough that the calendar stopped being a weapon. Mom had to do co-parenting classes. Dad got me every weekend and Wednesday dinners. The punch came years later at graduation, when they called my name. I saw Mom clap, stiff and small. Dad stood and put 2 fingers to his lips, the same way he'd do at the Willow. After the ceremony, I handed him a card. Inside was a photo I'd taken that winter. The willow tree, covered in snow. On the back I'd written, "Noon, every Saturday. I'm sorry I was late."
Story 3. I was the almost bride. Venue paid, dress fitted, #chosen. 2 days before our wedding, my fiancé, C, left for his bachelor lunch and went silent. I assumed hangover. At midnight, I got a DM from a stranger. "You don't know me, but you should." Attached were screenshots of C and a woman named Maya from 4 months back. They weren't explicit, just domestic. Groceries in a cart, a hand in hair at a street fair. The timestamp on one photo was the same day he told me he'd been stuck at a client site. I didn't rage. I printed it all, called my planner, and told her to keep the vendors but cancel the ceremony script. We turned the wedding into a party with no groom. The band agreed to play whatever I wanted. At the start time, I stood on the stage and said, "Thank you for coming to witness me not make a mistake." People gasped, then cheered like a stadium. C arrived mid-first set, pale and sweating, Maya on his arm like a hostage. He marched up and shouted about defamation. I gave the mic to the best man, who's a lawyer. He calmly said the word truth like it had a blade. Then the projector flickered on. I hadn't planned a slideshow. My grandmother had. She'd friended C on Facebook months ago and had been collecting his public posts because men my age remember paper. Slide 1. C's client site selfie. Zoom in, reflection in the car window, Maya's sunglasses perched on his head. Slide 2. His boys' night story. A boomerang clink, except the table reflection shows 2 wine glasses, one with lipstick. Grandma narrated like a nature documentary, deadpan and relentless. People laughed, then stopped, then stared. C sputtered that this was harassment. Grandma pressed the spacebar, and the next slide appeared. A calendar invite, auto-forward from his email to Maya's. He'd given Grandma his phone to fix the Wi-Fi once. She'd mailed the evidence to herself. Vendors drifted to the back wall, arms crossed like bouncers. C tried to grab the mic. The band leader stepped between us, all 6'5" of him, and said, "Time to go, champ." They left to polite applause and a surprisingly tasteful bass line. The twist arrived in the late-night lull when the venue manager tapped me. "You should see this," she said, holding out a phone. It was Maya. She'd posted a video from a cab, tearful, apologizing, saying she believed she was the only one. She panned to a hand on her knee. The hand belonged to C's boss. Caption: "He told me he was single. He told me she knew. He told both of us he was on a flight. He's fired." I didn't need revenge after that. The band played "I Will Survive," and my grandmother led the conga line. Story 4. Our neighborhood HOA president, Rick, enforced the rules like they were scripture. Mailboxes had to be colonial white. Trash bins couldn't be visible for more than 9 minutes, and my friend Tasha got fined for a chalk drawing her toddler made on their own driveway. Meanwhile, Rick's lawn looked like a used car lot. 3 SUVs, 2 guest cars that never left, and a mysterious stream of people rolling suitcases at all hours. One night, my 16-year-old, Eli, came home buzzing. "Rick's running Airbnbs out of the house," he said, showing me drone footage. He's into photography, of a nightly luggage parade, lockbox swaps, even a printed Wi-Fi password sign in the window. Short-term rentals are banned in our HOA and illegal without a city permit. We sent the footage to the HOA board anonymously. Rick dismissed it as AI fakery and doubled Tasha's fine for defamation. Eli suggested we go upstream. We filed an open records request with the city for lodging tax filings. The clerk emailed a spreadsheet of registered hosts. No Rick. But we recognized the addresses. 3 homes in our subdivision under an LLC with a P.O. box. That P.O. box matched the return address on Rick's HOA mailers. We brought it to the next meeting, printed and highlighted. Rick laughed. "I don't see my name," he said, tapping the LLC line. Then Eli, sweet, polite Eli, raised his hand and asked if the board would mind playing a 5-second clip. On the screen, Rick, recorded on our doorbell camera, lecturing my wife about unapproved wreaths. As he storms off, his phone rings. He answers, "Yeah, this is Rick with Colonial Oaks Holdings. Yes, the check-in code is 1987. The room went still. People looked at their phones, then at each other, like a flock turning midair. City compliance showed up within a week. Fines stacked daily. The HOA board called an emergency vote and removed Rick, citing self-dealing. They audited the books and found our landscaping fund had been paying for his short-term rental cleaners. The recovered cash paid for a small neighborhood park with shade trees and a swing set Tasha's toddler basically lives on. The gut punch came later. Eli posted a time-lapse of neighbors building the park, captioned, "No more chalk fines." The first comment was from Rick's adult daughter, who we'd never met. "He missed my birthday for board business 3 years in a row. Thanks for giving the neighborhood something he never did. Time."
Story 5. At my aunt's funeral, grief came in 2 flavors, real and performative. My cousin Darren specialized in the latter. Designer black suit, crocodile tears, car keys that could start a boat. He'd been helping Auntie with her finances since her stroke, which everyone said was generous because he worked in investments. I was the executor because I'm the organized niece with a label maker. After the service, we gathered in her living room for the will reading. The lawyers set up a small TV and pressed play. Auntie appeared in a floral blouse, filmed months earlier, voice steady. If you're watching this, I've gone where the good music is. This will is simple. She left the house to be sold, and the proceeds split equally among the cousins. Darren smiled at me like we shared a secret. Then she held up a blue lunchbox with chipped daisies. Except one thing. Whoever has been moving money out of account 4387 doesn't get a dime. You know who you are. The proof is in here. Darren went sheet white. He coughed, then laughed too loudly. "She's joking," he said. I opened the lunchbox. Inside were bank statements, each with tiny, neat notes in her handwriting. Darren withdrew $2,000, said for roof repair. Roof is fine. There were also printouts from Venmo and Cash App, and a thumb drive. We plugged it in. Screen recordings, months' worth of Auntie using her banking app while on speaker with Darren. He'd coached her to transfer funds to a high-yield sub-account he managed. The sub-account belonged to his shell company. Auntie had turned on screen record when her friend at church told her that was how grandchildren steal. Darren demanded a contextual understanding, shouting that she'd approved everything. The lawyer raised an eyebrow and read a clause. The will created a charitable trust that would activate if any beneficiary contested. Contesting would forfeit their share to a scholarship fund for caregivers. Auntie had thought of everything. The twist was quiet. Under the papers lay a small velvet pouch. Inside, a 10-year AA chip. A note. Darren, if you're reading this, you've relapsed into something that isn't booze. Stealing is still stealing. I love you, but love tells the truth. He sat down like someone unplugged him. The next week, Darren didn't contest. He sold his boat. He showed up at a meeting my friend sponsors, shaking so hard he had to hold the coffee with both hands. We sold the house. We funded 5 scholarships in Auntie's name. When the first caregiver walked across the stage, I tucked the blue lunchbox under my arm and felt for the first time in months like justice had a heartbeat.
Story 6. In grad school, I tutored at the Writing Center, which meant I spent nights under buzzing lights telling panicked undergrads that commas weren't moral failings. The department golden boy, let's call him Atlas, never needed my help. He had a literary agent before comps, a podcast, a swarm of sycophants. He also had a specialty for mimicking other people's voices so closely it felt like flattery until you read the third paragraph and realized your ideas had been neatly laundered. Atlas turns his dissertation into a book deal within a month. The manuscript read like a revelation, theory braided into personal history with an eerie intimacy. Something else felt familiar, like a song you can't place. Then the adjunct who'd mentored half of us, Dr. Merriweather, died unexpectedly. His office was boxed, his drafts scattered. 2 weeks later, his widow showed up at the Writing Center with a paper grocery bag. She told me to give these to someone who would know what to do, she said. Inside, printed chapters bound with faded binder clips, margins full of his tight, slanted notes. The titles matched Atlas's chapter headings almost word for word. In the back of one packet was an envelope addressed to himself, still sealed, stamped and postmarked from 3 years earlier. He'd mailed himself his own work as a time-stamped receipt because he couldn't afford a lawyer. The line that had made Atlas famous, "Memory is a house with the power cut, and touch is the fuse," was written there in Merriweather's green fountain pen ink, crossed out twice, amended, then underlined. The university convened an academic integrity hearing that felt like a funeral with microphones. Atlas argued shared intellectual community and intertextual resonance. The librarian countered with server logs. Atlas had accessed Merriweather's draft folder the day he volunteered to help clean out the office. The widow placed the sealed, postmarked envelope on the table like a final chord. When they opened it, the exact paragraph Atlas had read on NPR slid into the fluorescent light. The committee voted to revoke his degree, an extraordinary move, then referred it to the press's lawyers. His publisher canceled the book tour. The podcast feed went quiet. Atlas tried to pivot to contrition, but the adjunct's son, a lanky kid in a thrift store tie, stood at the podium during the campus memorial and said softly, "My father worried his life's work wouldn't outlive his paychecks. Thank you for proving him wrong." The widow used Atlas's settlement to endow a stipend for adjuncts. 1 month's rent, no questions asked. On the plaque outside the Writing Center, "For the ones who keep the lights on." Every time I lock up, I run my hand over his name and think about a fuse finally catching.
Story 7. I am a paramedic in a city where the potholes have their own personalities. For years, something about crash scenes felt choreographed. A specific tow company always appeared before dispatch even assigned one. They'd angle their rigs to protect the scene, then somehow hook the car before we finished triage. People complained about $1,000 storage fees and accidental transmission damage. One night, after we cut a teenager out of a Corolla, I watched the tow driver whisper to the responding officer. I recognized the handshake. Not metaphorical, a literal grip and tap that said, "We're square." I started logging. Times, plates, badge numbers. Nothing dramatic, just notes in the margins of my run sheets. Patterns emerged. Calls near certain intersections triggered tow arrivals within 3 minutes, faster than the physics of distance allowed. Then we responded to a fender bender at 2 a.m. 2 cars, both new, both insured by companies known to pay fast. Minor impact, no injuries, but both drivers told me the same thing. A guy in a reflective vest had waved them into a side street to get out of traffic. Then another car nudged the bumper from behind. When they called 911, a tow truck materialized like a magician's rabbit. I brought my notes to a city council aide who owed me a favor. She looped in the inspector general. They subpoenaed dispatch logs, phone records, everything. The tow company lawyer laughed in the first meeting. Coincidence, he said, and public service. Then the IG's tech guy asked if the tow boss enjoyed his dashcam videos. The boss puffed up, best on the market. The tech guy nodded, and by default, they upload to a public bucket unless you change the setting. He clicked a link. Up popped a trove. Dashcam footage of tow drivers staging bump assists, radios crackling with police scanner chatter, even a clip of the boss coaching a rookie on which intersection cameras were broken that week. The city cut their contract the next morning. The two officers who'd traded the grip and tap quietly resigned before the union could protect them. The DA charged the boss with insurance fraud and tampering. People started getting refund checks, small at first, then substantial as a class action gathered steam. The punch came months later when we worked a real wreck, a rollover on the River Road. A tow rig nosed up, lights spinning. I recognized the driver, the rookie from the video, now employed by a different company. He waited until we finished spinal immobilization, then asked, almost shyly, "Mind if I park over there?" He'd taped a handwritten sign to his dashboard. "No kickbacks. You call, I haul." On the corner of the sign, a kid's crayon drawing, a stick figure in a square truck, was captioned, "My dad helps." I checked his name tag. Same last name as the boss. "He's my uncle," he said, eyes steady, "not my teacher."
Story 8. I stage managed community theater because it's the only place where spreadsheets and glitter coexist. We were mounting the secret garden when the town's wealthiest donor informed us his niece, a sweet but pitch-challenged sophomore, would be playing the lead. He phrased it like philanthropy. Think of it as investing in potential. Our director, who once cried at a well-timed blackout, said no. The donor threatened to pull funding. Board members made pragmatic noises. The director went home and practiced breathing into a towel. We did what theaters do, cast the best voice, and gave the niece a lovely featured role. The donor retaliated by delaying the check for our upgraded lightboard. On cue, the ancient dimmer rack developed a personality disorder. During a preview, the house lights decided the overture was intermission. Someone in row F hissed, "Amateur hour." The niece, to her credit, kept smiling. Tensions peaked on final dress when the donor stormed into the wings with a check and a threat. Replace your lead with my niece or watch your blackout become permanent. He had timed it for maximum leverage. We needed that check to pay the musicians. The director stared him down while I calculated how to reprogram 112 cues in 2 hours. Then, as if summoned by the gods of karmic comedy, the city's safety inspector arrived for an unannounced visit, frowning at a tip about faulty fire curtains. The donor, worried the show might be shut down and his niece embarrassed, offered to fix the curtain personally and yanked the emergency release. The curtain dropped, stuck, and the motor burned with a smell like toasted pennies. Show canceled. For now. We pivoted again. I slapped our security camera feed onto a Facebook Live to explain the postponement and keep the audience engaged. While we spoke, the mic picked up the daughter off camera berating his niece. "You had one job. Be special." She flinched like she'd been waiting for the sentence all her life. Comments poured in. Donations, too. People hate bullies more than they love musicals. The fix took a week. When we finally opened, the niece asked if she could talk to the audience. She walked out, breath trembling, and said, "I love singing. I don't love being used." She handed the check back to the donor in front of 300 people and took her place in the ensemble. The lead started the first verse, and something electric happened. Harmonies bloomed, the orchestra surged, and the niece's voice, freed from expectation, found its lane and shone. The twist arrived at curtain call. The inspector, turns out his sister uses a wheelchair, had watched the live and rallied a grant for accessible theaters. We received more than the donor's pledge, contingent on never naming a seat after him.
3 weeks later, a theater across town sent us a press release. They'd accepted his money. Buried in the photos, front row, center, sat the niece with a different family, holding a program for our show. On the back, where we printed donors, a line read, "In honor of every understudy waiting their turn."
Story 9. I run a small rescue that holds adoption fairs in the parking lot of a feed store. We're held together by duct tape, bake sale money, and an army of retirees with saint-level patience. There's a woman in town, glossy Instagram, sunflower wallpaper, who breeds rare doodle mixes and trashes shelters as disease pits. She called us poverty pets once. We stopped tagging her. A month ago, a man in a veteran's cap showed up at our event with a photo of a scruffy terrier. "Name's Porter," he said. "Disappeared last year. I still leave the back gate open in case." We scanned his email chain with animal control, the posters, the microchip number. No hits. He left us a box of homemade jerky for the dogs, the kind of kindness that makes your throat hurt. 2 hours later, Sunflower Lady rolled in with a pop-up tent and a banner. "Organic micro labradoodles, raised with love." She pitched 20 feet from us like it was a duel. Her puppies were adorable, buttersoft and confused. She don't chip, claiming EMF sensitivities. People cooed and Venmo'd deposits. Then a little girl in sparkly boots tugged my sleeve. "That dog has the same ear," she said, pointing at one of the breeder's micro labs. The ear had a notch, like a tiny crescent moon, identical to Porter's photo. I asked Sunflower if we could scan the pup just in case. She made a show of outrage, but set the puppy down. She was live streaming and wanted to look cooperative. I waved the scanner. It beeped. Microchip. A number. Turned out Sunflower wasn't anti-chip. She was anti-trace. She'd been flipping found dogs by claiming they were designer mixes and never updating the chips. I called the microchip company, rattled off the number, and they patched me through to the owner on file. The veteran's cap man picked up on the second ring. I asked if Porter's ear had a notch. Silence. Then a sound like someone's ribs cracking in reverse. "Moon-shaped," he whispered. He arrived trembling, moving slow like the world might break if he rushed. The dog sniffed, froze, then launched, full-body wag, making squeaks dogs only make for their person. Sunflower blustered about misunderstandings and breeder rights. A woman from the feed store, who'd been watching with her arms crossed, flipped the live stream towards Sunflower and said, "Say hi to 12,000 viewers." Comments multiplied like gnats in August. Animal control showed up because the chief watches Facebook like people watch weather. They scanned the rest. 3 more microlabs were chipped to missing dogs. Fines, seizures, court dates, terrible and perfect words. The punch landed quietly later. The veteran came back with a donation and a folded photo, him in uniform, younger, grinning with Porter as a puppy. On the back, he'd scrawled, "When I got home from deployment, he remembered me first. Today, you made him remember me again." We renamed our fundraiser from Potty in the Park to Moon Ear Day. The logo is a little notch, like a promise you can see. Story 10. I type what powerful people say. Court reporters aren't supposed to have opinions, just clean transcripts and a poker face. Our county's traffic court was a factory, overseen by Judge Harrow, a man who could turn a seatbelt ticket into a sermon about personal responsibility. Rumor said he ran a diversion program where certain defendants got their charges vaporized if they attended his ethics seminars. Attendance required a cash administrative fee paid to a nonprofit with a suspiciously similar name to his chambers. I noticed oddities. The same defense lawyers' clients all qualified, even when their speeds would have stripped paint. The poor, the unconnected, the ones who needed their licenses for work, somehow they never did. I flagged nothing, that's not my job. But then a teenage girl stood before him, palms damp, caught doing 67 in a 45,
taking her diabetic kid brother to urgent care. Harrow sighed about choices and fined her into next month. 2 cases later, a developer's son with a reckless charge strolled up. Harrow smiled like he'd found a 20 in his robe. "I believe in second chances," he intoned, dismissing everything once the boy volunteered for the seminar. Back at my station, I opened my macro settings, the shortcuts that type out long legal phrases, and created a new one. When I typed DIVR, it expanded to the full nonprofit name, fee amount, and check destination. I wasn't changing testimony, I was making repetition visible. Pages filled with the pattern like wallpaper. A public defender, sharp eyes, sharper shoes, asked for my transcripts on a bundle of appeals. He read for an hour without speaking, then said, "Do you realize you've written the indictment already?" He filed a complaint with the State Judicial Board, stapling my pages like an art installation. The board subpoenaed bank records. The nonprofit deposited checks into an account that paid for, among other things, a mahogany desk and a golf club membership. The ethics seminar? A PDF slideshow with clip art. When the hearing came, it was in the same courtroom where I documented 100 little injustices. Harrow wore his robe like armor. The board chair asked him to explain why the diversion list matched the donor list from his last campaign. He launched into a speech about optics. The chair held up my transcript. "This isn't optics. This is a pattern." They removed him from the bench that day. The DA charged him later. Appeals rolled back fines. Licenses were restored. The teenage girl came to pick up her certified copy and hugged me so fast my hands jerked. "I can drive my brother to school again," she said into my shoulder, mortified at her own tears. The last session I ever reported in that room, a retired judge temporarily assigned to clean up the docket sat down at Harrow's old bench. He ran his palm over the mahogany and frowned. "Feels expensive," he said, then glanced at me. "What's your macro for justice?" I laughed for the first time in months. "No macro," I said, stacking fresh paper. "We type it the long way every time."
Story 11. I volunteer at our city marathon, the kind where the finish line smells like orange peels and triumph. My job is split mat tech. I sit in the folding chair with the laptop watching timing chips ping across checkpoints at 10K, half, and 30K. You learn the rhythm of honesty. Fast people surge, bonk, rally. Mortals hover like birds drafting each other. Cheaters, though, move like broken sheet music. An hour after the elites, a local inspirational influencer, Brad, started trending on the event hashtag. He'd promised to finally break 3 hours after years of grind. Cameras everywhere. At the 10K mat, his chip registered 004432. Reasonable. At the half, somehow, 011810. My partner whistled. Dude found rocket fuel. But the 30K split posted a time that would make national news. 015000. That meant he ran 8.8 miles at world-class pace. Uphill. On my screen, the suspicious splits flashed yellow. Protocol says do nothing until verification. But the women's third-place runner rolled in breathless and radiant, and the wheelchair division winner, Marjorie, was waiting for hand cycle awards, arms banded with effort, a goddess in carbon fiber. I watched Brad coast down the final stretch, hair perfect, GoPro arm high, shouting that anything was possible if you don't make excuses. We pulled the mat logs. Each chip has not just times, but antenna signal strength. Brad's were weird, high at 10K, then flat at the half, then suddenly spiking like he'd been lowered onto the mat. The city's traffic cams clinched it. A taxi cut across the course at mile 14 and set down a guy in a blue singlet just past the checkpoint. Then someone DM'd us a Strava link. The driver had a public profile titled Work Hustle, and his route matched the miraculous splits. Race control huddled. Sponsors were nervous. Brad brings eyeballs. The race director, a soft-spoken woman who ran her first marathon in her 50s, squared her shoulders and walked to the mic. "We have reason to believe a runner used transportation during the race," she said. "He is disqualified." A murmur rose, then a cheer like a stadium. Brad tried to pivot, claimed his chip malfunctioned, that haters doctored the footage. The timing mats don't care about feelings.
We published the logs with a calm explainer. The twist came 15 minutes later when Marjorie wheeled onto the stage and said, "While we're being honest, I crossed the half in 01-18-12. That's what training looks like." The crowd roared, and Brad's sponsor posted a statement ending their partnership mid-applause. Weeks later, our club 3D printed a tiny silver mat and presented it to the taxi driver at the finish line of his first legit 5K. He cried into his race shirt. He said, "I wanted to show my daughter the right way to be fast." Marjorie clipped the charm to her chair and winked at him. "Welcome to the grind."
Story 12. I was the dishwasher they forgot about. Head down, headset on, hands in hot water until the skin on my knuckles looked like topography. The bistro was a darling of food blogs. Reclaimed wood, forage garnish, the chef's tattoos photographed like religious icons. Tucked behind all that beauty was Davin, the owner, who liked to talk about family during pre-shift and productivity metrics during payroll. We pooled tips, which he safeguarded, and yet my take-home never matched the full dining room. One night a server, Val, dropped a tray and burst into tears. Not over the glass, over a rent notice in her apron. "My tips are short again," she said. Our manager shrugged at the POS like it had rolled snake eyes. I started watching the end of night. Davin exported the gratuity report to a thumb drive, disappeared into his office, and re-emerged with envelopes. The numbers felt curated. Dishwashers aren't supposed to ask questions, so I didn't. I just took out the trash a lot, which meant I noticed when the blue recycling bin in the alley filled with shredded reports. And because I'm a child of the internet, I know cross-cut confetti is only a puzzle with extra steps. I scooped a bag into a Cambro, took it home, and spent 3 nights at my kitchen table with tape and a podcast. Page by page, a pattern emerged. Davin skimmed 2 to 3% off pooled tips nightly and shunted it into Misk Kitchen Supplies. These supplies were crypto buys on an exchange, the kind with a squid logo. Val and I didn't go nuclear. We printed the reconstructed pages, annotated them, and sent an unsigned packet to the State Labor Board and the food blogger who made Davin famous. We also stuck a second packet in the health department's mailbox with the note, "Unrelated but relevant," because if you steal, you probably also ignore fridge logs. The timing was unkind. The blogger dropped a story the morning a wedding party booked a buyout, and the health inspector showed up at line check. By dinner, the place was shuttered for remediation. Davin went online with a sob story about administrative errors. The labor board didn't find that compelling. Fine stacked, back pay was ordered, and the Squid Exchange helpfully emailed receipts when subpoenaed. Then the twist. Davin had invested most of the skim into a token that rug pulled the week before the raid. He'd stolen thousands from us to buy magic beans and ended up broke enough to need a GoFundMe that raised $20 and a comment that said, "Pay your people." We took our checks, actual numbers, no curation, and rented the space as a worker co-op with a microloan from a customer who'd watched it all unfold. On opening night, the menu featured one appetizer called Misk Kitchen Supplies, crispy potato skins piled high and finished with a sprinkle of sea salt we bought as a joke with the last $12 in the tip jar. We served it on blue confetti napkins. Val paid her rent early. I switched from dish pit to prep and learned to julienne without bleeding. Family finally meant as a verb.
Story 13. I'm the woman from the stock photo, the one in the Meet Our Team collage holding a coffee and laughing at nothing. I sell my face for extra cash between gigs. Then a friend sent me a startup's homepage where I was listed as Chief Strategy Officer. New name, fancy title, same cheekbones. Their pitch deck bragged about female-led leadership and ethical AI. They'd photoshopped a conference badge onto my blouse. I emailed their info like a polite ghost, no reply. I DM'd their founder, a TEDx bro with permanent sneaker blur. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. 2 weeks later, I spotted their booth at a tech expo. I walked up, pointed at my banner self, and said, "I'd like to meet me." The rep stammered and offered swag. I took a tote and snapped a selfie with my doppelganger. Petty? Maybe. But the conference hashtag loved it. What I didn't know was their demo day was being live streamed to a few hundred bored VCs and 1,000 startup rubberneckers. The founder hit the stage, spouting Disrupt Speak. The slide behind him, my face, name changed to Sasha L. He bragged their ethics committee had female stewardship. I waited until Q&A and lined up behind 3 dudes with lanyards gate of hubris. When the mic came to me, I said, "Hi, Sasha here. Can you explain my compensation package?" People laughed, then murmured, then went quiet as he realized I wasn't a plant. He stammered that they hire models for mock-ups, that titles were aspirational. The live stream chat became a bonfire. A woman from a fund raised her hand and asked if any of the board had met me. Silence. I held up my 1099 from the stock site like a courtroom exhibit. The moderator, bless her annihilating smile, asked, "Do you have an actual female executive?" The founder improvised an answer so bad it achieved art. Here's the twist. One of the live stream viewers was the actual chief compliance officer of a big co-partner they'd bragged about. She tweeted, "We have no relationship with this company," and their logo disappeared from the deck faster than a magician's rabbit. Then a lawyer on the stream pointed out that claiming women executives to qualify for a state innovation grant constitutes fraud. Grant revoked, term sheet withdrawn. They tried to pivot to victimhood. Cancel culture costs us jobs, until a former engineer posted a Medium essay detailing unpaid overtime and NDAs shoved across desks at midnight. The SEC sent a letter. The fake me vanished from the site. I got a message from a different founder the next week. Saw the video. Want a real job? She ran a boring company that made boring software that payroll departments actually needed. At my first team meeting, nobody asked me to pose with a coffee. They asked me if I preferred weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones. The photo on our About page? A group shot. Slightly chaotic, me laughing at something real.